my name is Meepleless and this is Literally Graphic. And today I am going to be talking about a book that hit all the points for me. I mean, I checked it out from the library first because it was by a female author. She's also happens to be from Beirut, which Lebanon is not somewhere that I've ever read anyone from, I don't think, let alone this past year, so that was quite exciting. And then it ended up being amazing, so I really loved it. Start out with the obvious, I guess we could talk about the art first. The art was really striking. It was white on black, as you will likely be seeing right now. It reminded a lot of people apparently of Persepolis, which I haven't looked at in like a million years. So it actually wasn't the first book that came to mind when I saw it. I feel like there is room for comparison, but I'm not sure why people talked about it all that much. It reminded me a lot more of Epileptic, which one person brought up, so that was exciting. And even if they were similar, I'm not sure if that's necessarily the end of the world, because there's a lot of artwork that looks similar, and just because this artwork is different from what we see in most mainstream comics over here in the West does not mean it's the end of the world if 2 or 3 or maybe more people that we don't read, you know, have this kind of style. It was used to great effect. Anyway, I thought. The characters were all pretty distinctive and interesting looking, had a lot of character, both visually and in the ways that they acted in the comics. The framing was also really nice. It felt really sparse, but that combined with like the black backgrounds kind of gave this feeling of theater actually, which was combined with the fact that sometimes people would talk from off frame, and it just felt like a very minimalistic theatrical experience. It definitely added to the ambiance of what was going on during that specific span of time. The danger, the unknown, the war, the snipers, the life that Abirached is born into is utterly depressing. Especially considering how many hundreds of people who have died in the weeks and days prior to me filming this review, where the violence keeps coming closer and closer to home. That's probably another reason that this book hit me so strongly. It's in the past, but it's going on now. The thing that really struck me was the last paragraph in the introduction by Trina Robbins. I found a recipe for sfauf. I did some googling and I wasn't able to find out how to pronounce that. But anyway, yeah, it looks pretty easy to make, but you need semolina flour and turmeric. I shall walk 2 blocks to the supermarket for the flour and spice, and nobody will shoot at me. Doesn't everyone deserve to live like that? And even when I was originally reading this, before the world descended into chaos, before the world descended even further into chaos and death, everyone deserves not being shot at. The story basically follows Abirached and her brother and their neighbors over the course of one night while they're waiting for their parents to come home from visiting their grandparents from the other side of a blockade that divides the city that they live in, where there are snipers and checkpoints and people just disappear. This was not a point in history that I'm necessarily that well educated on. As I always say over and over again, these are my attempts to become a more well-rounded and better person. We get to know all of the people, despite the limited amount of time and space, not only in the story but also in the book itself, which is fairly short. Well, it is very common for people to really respect those who can knit together a sprawling epic of Game of Thrones proportions. It takes an equal amount of skill, I think most of us realize, to write a concise book. Conveying vast amounts of detail in just a few pages is just as difficult if not perhaps harder. And that is what Abirached has done. She has placed innumerable limitations on herself, focusing very specifically on the story she wants to tell. But so many things are communicated to us, not only about the history of that city, the history of that war, the meaninglessness of that war, as if the humanity of the people suffering in that war. It's all communicated, and nothing is, no word, no frame is put to waste. We learn about the dapper neighbor who lost his twin brother to the war very early on, I believe. We learn about the young married couple who's just starting out on life, trying to emigrate to Canada, expecting their first child, not sure where they're going to be born. We learn about the grandmother figure who is the first to find children, and so many others. Just the entire building coming together to try and find safety wherever they can, trying to make a life however they can in the small space in her foyer, the safest place in the entire building, trying to escape, trying to continue on, trying to make sense of everything that's going on around them. The story was powerful, and I don't think it's just because of when I read it. I really think it's really great. It really is among one of the best books I read this year. There's obviously a lot of people who disagree with me. Some people found it boring, but if you enjoy reading history through the lens of people's personal experiences and getting to know those people who have experienced history, I think that you would probably enjoy this. If enjoy is the right word. I didn't quite realize how emotional I would get, which this was a lot harder to review than I realized. I think it's just because of everything that's happened even this past week. It's just so horrible. So, yeah, I'll see you all sometime. And as always, Literally Graphic is recorded on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation. I live here because of British colonization, Indigenous genocide, and more geographically specific, Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase, which was finalized in 1805 between representatives of the Crown and certain Mississauga peoples. This treaty was a lie and has since been broken many times over. Saying so reflects only my own small steps towards knowing the truth and does nothing for reconciliation.